Nacht Der Untoten wasn't even supposed to exist, but without this map, Call of Duty Zombies as a whole wouldn't exist. Back in 2008 World at War, zombies was never supposed to be a thing. This was a serious World War II shooter. In no way did Activision want zombies, a fictional creature, inside of a World War II Call of Duty game. It was absurd. But, of course, it happened. How though? During that time, games before this, we had Call of Duty 4 in 2007, a bunch of other World War II shooters before that. The idea of putting zombies in a game like this, where Call of Duty's other competitors were Medal of Honor, Brothers in Arms, they wanted Call of Duty to be taken seriously. And so when Activision discovered that a bunch of Treyarch employees had implemented a small zombies mode into their most recent game, there was the message of, no way, this can't happen. Eventually, luckily, Treyarch did end up persuading Activision to let them include this into the main game. However, there were exceptions. Zombies in World at War could receive no marketing. They didn't want people purchasing this serious World War II shooter for the first time to know that there was a funny, non-serious zombies mode in it. Treyarch said, okay, that's fine. The only way that Activision allowed Treyarch to include this is if they added it as an Easter egg, a bonus that you get, a treat for the players after completing the campaign. When you do all of the main missions, right at the end, suddenly you unlock this zombies mode. Zombies in itself was an Easter egg, a mashup of everything that the developers at Treyarch had made for the campaign and the multiplayer were taken by just a couple of Treyarch developers and slowly implemented into a zombies mode. Whilst they were doing motion capture for one of the campaign missions, one of the developers noticed that actually some of the wounded soldiers looked similar to zombies. They noticed that some of the voice acting, the screaming, the screeches, once again from wounded soldiers, would make for a good addition to a zombies mode. They realised that one of the multiplayer maps, Airfield, specifically a small portion of it, a bunker, would make for a good place to fend off against a horde of the undead. And so just a small bunch of developers took different parts from the campaign and multiplayer and almost secretly, behind the backs of the higher-ups at Treyarch and Activision, started to use these assets to create a zombies mode. It began as just a small fun side project, but after building it up, realised that actually this could be something. It was fun, which is when these small group of developers revealed their zombies mode to the heads at Treyarch, who then took it to Activision, who then initially said, no, we're not adding this into Call of Duty, but eventually backed down and said, okay, we will, but only as an Easter egg, as a bonus for completing the campaign, and we're not going to market it. And that was the beginning of what is now a staple in COD Zombies. Every Treyarch title after this, Black Ops 1, 2, 3, 4, Cold War, and even a game that wasn't fully theirs, Vanguard, would go on to include Call of Duty Zombies. It went from being an Easter egg to a whole fully fledged mode. But the very first map where it all began, Nacht Der Untoten, was nothing like what Call of Duty Zombies is today, which you would expect, with having just a couple of developers working on it, little to no budget. Nacht Der Untoten was nothing, but at the same time, it was everything. Nacht was, and still is, the smallest zombies map, because it was taken from a multiplayer map, and Treyarch Zombies developers didn't have the budget to create their own assets. This meant that they had to start small. If they took a larger multiplayer map to be the first zombies map, then this mode could feel too empty, since they wouldn't be able to create their own things. So it had to be small. It had to be small enough to make it feel fulfilling and a challenge, and that's what Nacht was. You could argue this is still the hardest zombies map we have ever gotten. Some people would say Nuketown, other people would say 5, but I would say the World at War version of Nacht, not Black Ops 1, not the other iterations we've seen in Black Ops 3 or Transit if you want to count that, but the original Nacht Der Untoten is still the hardest zombies map we have ever gotten. There was no perks, no Juggernog, no Quick Revive, no Speed Cola, Stamina Up, all of the perks that you would come to expect in Call of Duty nowadays. Even back in World at War 2008 to 2009, in maps like Verrucht, Derice, Shinonuma, we had many of those perks, but in Nacht, there were none. It was 2 hits from the zombies and you were down. That combined with how small the map was, also there being no pack-a-punch. If you're used to playing zombies now, if you were only introduced to it in 2012, 15, it was difficult. Which also brings me to what type of players would Call of Duty Zombies have taken in? Because I wasn't old enough during 2008, I only got into Call of Duty really during BO1 2010, actually MW2 2009. But one question I've always had is, would it have been the campaign players or the multiplayer players, maybe a little bit of both, that enjoyed this Zombies mode? Because the difficulty isn't for everyone. The casual Call of Duty multiplayer player that only gets, I don't know, 5 kills, 6 kills a match, surely would have found Nacht Der Untoten too difficult, but Zombies was so different from a serious multiplayer and campaign story, so in a way, it's almost surprising that it took off the way it did. A lot of modes like this don't. We've seen so many games over the years that have introduced a small bonus game mode in there just for players to enjoy, and they haven't taken off. They weren't popular and were dropped a few months after they were released. We never heard from them again. But COD Zombies was different. Even though it was missing quite a few features that we are used to nowadays in Zombies, it also introduced some things that have become a staple. This was the first ever time we saw the mystery box. Nacht also had the ray gun, which sounds really weird. A map that shouldn't even exist introduced what is now a legendary Call of Duty weapon. Nacht also gave us power-ups, insta-kill, the nuke, double points, max ammo, all things that if we didn't have them would have made it much harder than it already was. As well as those, it also gave us repairable barriers, which might not seem much, but again, this was a new mode. War weapons, a small Easter egg in a way, being the cabinet, where you could purchase one of the worst weapons in COD for 5,000 points. Essentially, behind all of the layers, Call of Duty Zombies Nacht Der Untoten was a tower defense game. You played as 4 unknown soldiers trapped in a small building with 3 doors to open, trying to fend off hordes of zombies as they break in through the windows. You can do that by either killing them or building up the barriers, and your one main objective is to survive. It was simple. There was no storyline, one Easter egg, which was the musical radio where if you knifed it, it would play songs taken from World at War's campaign, and that was it. No power switch, no perks, one mystery box location. It was simple yet effective, difficult yet fun. It laid the groundworks for a mode that should have never even existed. Nacht Der Untoten was a side project that became a staple. If you're interested to hear Treyarch's explanation as to how Nacht Der Untoten and Call of Duty Zombies as a whole came to exist, there is an interview that a few of the developers did during the development of Black Ops 3, which I find super interesting. It's very rare that you hear any developer really talk about the beginnings of a mode, yet one that came out so long ago now, but for Zombies especially, one that is so mysterious.
Okay, well, let's talk about it. We make a very social game. The multiplayer game is incredibly social, and our fans love it. But one part of the game that literally only exists because of our fans is our zombies.
Yeah.
It was a passion project inside the studio that totally should never have, you know, in any sort of like, I probably shouldn't even be here as a studio head because I let this thing happen at a time when the development was strained and the team was, you know, in a difficult place trying to release a historically authentic cinematic World War II game. And then you hear, have you heard they threw a zombie in there? It's a Nazi zombie, right? Everyone likes to kill Nazi zombies. So, you know, it's a fun new game co-op mode. And I'm like, whoa, like, this hasn't been greenlit. Like, what's going on, you know? You got to try.
Did you just sort of start moonlighting on zombies? And you were just like, you know what, I have this idea and I'm just basically going to beg forgiveness? Is that where that came from?
I mean, the studio itself, I mean, it was, as Mark was saying, it kind of comes from the guys having a passion to create it and just kind of toying things around and playing with stuff. And then putting it in front of Mark and kind of showing it and saying, okay, the temperature was good. Okay, it's all good. Yeah. And then I think Mark then went on a process of introducing it to our publisher bit by bit.
We actually learned like a really valuable lesson about how to internally market features that were controversial through that process, because you know that was our first co-op experience as a team making a game that was cooperative, and we were just it was a thing that evolved over time as we were making the campaign game for co-op. We just learned and discovered that hey, the most fun experiences are when you're defending and you're defending together and you're playing these kind of defense missions.
Yeah,
and that just was like, we should just make a mode that is just about defending and having waves of attackers, and that was where it kind of started. And then the zombie portion came in because one of our missions was based on the Peleliu Island, where a bunch of airstrikes had come in. So we went to mocap, and we motion captured all of these walking wounded soldiers. So they're all kind of like hobbling around and injured. And one of our lead scripters at the time on the campaign he started to plug that in and say, you know, it's a little bit more fun when there's zombies in there, when there's soldiers.
Yeah.
And he started to, you know, add some layers to the mechanic, put some, you know, started to put the windows that you could repair and the wall buys.
Yeah.
And as we started to build this game out,
all different departments start climbing in. After they're crunched at night, like the sound team starts putting in, the animation team starts putting in. It was total grassroots.
It just started. People started playing it on the you know, on the team, and it just started coming
in the middle of the
night. More people got aware.
They should have been going home to get sleep. They had me play it, and I was like, oh, this is a lot of fun. I'm gonna have to figure. Now I've got the problem of figuring out how to support the team to get it done.
Yeah.
So I just did the exact same thing. I literally, you know, wouldn't give it too much of a preamble. I just sit down with people and have them play with me. And isn't this fun? And just get them actually emotionally invested in what it was. But that only goes so far in business, because this is a, you know, as I talked to you about the origins of this thing, this is a authentic, cinematic experience inside of a historical setting. In this case, and World at War was a very like intense, brutal, serious, you know, World War II game.
Yeah.
And there's some people who are like, you're not sticking zombies in Call of Duty. I mean, like, what are you talking about? Like, have you lost your mind, man?
Yeah.
The thing about it was, we made this deal with Activision, who owns Treyarch and is our publisher, that it wouldn't get marketed. We wouldn't market this. It's okay. Let us release it as an Easter egg. Like, after everyone's already experienced the, you know, artfully crafted, beautiful Call of Duty game that we've been working on for years. Let them experience that game. After the credits roll, we'll have this little surprise at the end. It's a lot of fun. I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah.
So they let us do that. And I think that very decision to actually not, and it's a very un-Call of Duty-like thing in this world to do, if you think about it, not promote it, not market it at all. The people who found it, who'd already got what they bargained for, they played their game, and they took it, they owned it, and that very same internet blew it up for us.
Yeah.
They took it, they got to own it.
The fans of your game getting so excited about that it blows up. It becomes its own thing. Their support, their passion leads to...
It becomes a main part of what a Treyarch Call of Duty game, what a Treyarch Black Ops game is.
Yeah.
It takes center stage as part of what Black Ops, when we shipped Black Ops, it had an epic campaign, it had an awesome multiplayer, and it had a zombies that came with it and just became part of what we make when we make our Call of Duty games.
Yeah.
Like, it's a legitimate
its own
pillar on the disc, you know, and it kind of, you know, from those humble kind of beginnings, you know, in terms of what's fun, what's engaging, to the point now where it's getting allocations and it's getting resources in the studio, so we're developing it, which are just as long and just as weighty as other things. And you have to, you know, with DLC and digital content and stuff and so forth, consider it like a campaign, consider it like a full story.
It has a 7-year story arc for its characters that we've been going on with this journey that will...
And I think that's I think that's something that you'll actually be interested in hearing, is that the story for zombies didn't always exist. There was not this comprehensive and you know, forethought put into what this story was going to be from start to finish.
Yeah.
We had very little fiction around it. I mean, it was the very first iteration of zombies was literally hobbled together from things that we found from other parts of the game.
They were mute characters, right? They didn't speak. They didn't have any personality in that sense, right?
But the community started to pick up on little hints of things in the game. And there were some intentional Easter eggs that were put around, but there were also some ones that we didn't actually place that the fans started to have these conspiracy theories around. Just what does that mean? You know, and they would fight with one another about what things meant.
There was one example which was, it was a texture that was warped. Just warped at the corner, right? And they found it, they came in on it, and, you know, it was like finding a deity on your toast, you know? It was like, oh, wow. They're like, they're saying something here, that's like a demon or something, and that's because he's meddling in other powers, and it was just that we warped the texture. But we saw that kind of interest going, and it was like, we should actually do more of this stuff, deliberately, you know?
So, there we go. Zombies would never have existed without Nacht Der Untoten. In fact, this shouldn't have existed at all. It was never greenlighted by Activision, the publishers. The higher-ups at Treyarch didn't even know it was a thing until it was made. It was a secret thing that initially just a couple of developers started working on, but then other people from the campaign and multiplayer started to lend their assets to this small zombies team. So really you could say it was everyone that played a part, and without all of those developers that were there back during 2008, COD Zombies would not exist. In fact, it shouldn't do.